All right. Hi. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's nice to see all of you on LinkedIn and anywhere else you are live streaming. I'm Grace Young Foster. I'm the founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative. Welcome to our Let's Talk event series. And I'm so excited about the conversation we're going to have tonight. We have the wonderful and amazing Tony Rivera. He is founder of Fostering Minds, a incredible school counselor from what I hear in the state of New York. And he's now a doctoral candidate, and he's also a foster care alum. And it's so great to have you here, Tony. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Grace, for having me and offering me the opportunity to share my story.
Absolutely. So, Tony, we met through a mutual friend, and we've been
Yes,
talking for a while, and I've seen just here and there parts of your life and your story and your journey that are pretty incredible and astounding. And I'm sure that, some folks in your life know a lot about it, and some in your folks in your life
yes,
don't really know about your history in the foster care system. And I'd love for you to just share with us, however much or little of your story you'd like to share about your lived experience.
absolutely. I guess I'll start off by saying I was born to a mother who was just 15 when she had me. And as you can imagine, a 15-year-old having a baby, pretty much a baby herself, um, had to make a decision. And at first, I would like to just put out there, I'm just so happy she made the decision to keep me because all of the amazing things I was able to accomplish and all the lives I was able to touch, I would not have been able to do that. Um, but she had me, I was 15. And from my early birth to about 8 years old, um, it's sort of like a blur to me in some instances. So there are times where I do remember parts and pieces of that time period. But I would say, definitely at the age of 8, I entered into the foster care system, and my first exposure was with a family friend. Um, it was a older lady. She was good friends with my aunt, my biological aunt, and she lived about 7 to 8 minutes from where my aunt lived. I stayed with her really briefly to about, I'm gonna say maybe 8.5, 9, until I was placed into another foster family, which was a little further away within the boroughs of New York City. Oh, I failed to mention, yeah, my birthplace is Brooklyn, New York. I was born in Brooklyn, New York.
Nice.
Yes, representing the BK is in my heart. Um, Once I went to my second foster care, my foster home, um, bad experience. The foster parents, I didn't know what I know now of how they are compensated for being foster parents. There's a lot of neglect that took place in the household. That didn't really last very long. That's why I had a you get a social worker that sort of follows your case. And the minute I had the opportunity to contact my social worker, I let them know what was happening.
Hmm.
They made some immediate switches. Unfortunately, always in the eyes of the court, they try to get you back with the parent as soon as possible. So I actually went back home for a little bit, short stint. That didn't really last very long. Um, I was, abused, physically, emotionally, and that was like a tough period. So out of rebellion, I would run the streets. And think about it, 8.5, 9 year old running the streets. I would ride the subway trains to the end. Um, I would be on the streets begging for money. I always knew where to find food, but I always knew that I would come home late at night, so that way I wouldn't have to interact with my family. That went on from the period from like 9 to about 12. 12 years old, because I was running away so much. I was in a lot of different group homes. I want to say maybe 20 to 25 between the age 9 and 12. But I always knew there was, in New York City, you can get a place in emergency if you go to a location in Manhattan where they were able to sort of put you in emergency placement, and they'll put you in group homes. And when you're in these group homes, this was my first exposure. It's a little hierarchy, right? There's people who are in the group homes who are much older. They've been there for quite some time. So I'm a new person coming in, and sometimes you have to defend yourself and fend for yourself when you're in your placements. I'm not a fighter by nature, but I had to defend myself during that time. I did that for a long time. I would leave, run away, run the streets. When I needed food or needed a place to live, I always went back to the emerging place where I knew they were going to place me in a different group home.
Wow.
It got to a point where I was 12 where I ran away so much that they actually put me in a foster care agency outside of New York City in the Westchester County area. And that is where I would say my sort of life started to take shape. The organization was an all boys agency. They had a campus living environment, sort of like a residential setting. And they had different units set up for different kids at different ages. Um,
Okay.
I ran through their entire sort of program until I got into high school. I transitioned out when I was 21 when I left for college. So I fast forward, all my years from 12 into my high school years. Um, and once I left for college, um, I knew that I never wanted to go back. I chose a college in upstate New York, the northern portion of New York, for two reasons. One, I didn't want to be a kid in the group home with a curfew,
Hmm.
and I wanted to sort of get as far as away from New York City because that was the only thing that I had known at the time. Um, I got accepted into what's called the Higher Education Opportunity Program. It's a college access program for students who are academic and financially at a disadvantage. And I
Hmm.
would say to this day, that program saved my life. Because as you can imagine, going from group homes to group homes, my education lag. Um, I lagged. I lagged
Yeah.
in my English proficiency. I lagged in, a lot of my academics. So I actually graduated from high school. I want to say a year after my class, a year and a half after my
Hmm.
original class had graduated. So I was already an older student. But once I left for college and I arrived at college, I got into this program. This program provided me a summer program to prepare me for my first semester of college. Um, my
Yeah.
first
That.
major, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. Go. Go ahead. Go ahead.
My major was culinary arts, and I chose that on purpose because, I was a kid coming out of the group home, and I wanted a skill. I wanted to learn how to cook, so if I ever had my own, own place, I'll be able to have those skills. Um, I went to culinary school, graduated. Um, I got to college playing basketball. So I actually played basketball and got into this opportunity program. Um, and I just had mentors along the way that have helped me. My high school coach, my school counselor. Um, but I do want to say I never told my story until I was interviewed by my high school newspaper in my junior year. And that's where it was with the help of my school counselor that said, you know what, I think you should share your story. I think other students need to hear. And
Yeah.
that's where I got out of my comfort zone and got out of my sort of my shyness. Believe it or not, I was really shy growing up. I'm not that way now. I'm not that way now. Um, but fast forward,
Yeah.
every one of my degrees and my education was all intentional. I went to school for culinary arts. I went to school for business because I wanted to learn how to handle my finances, and I knew someday I wanted to run a business. I didn't know what I was going to be running, but I want to at least know I had the skill set to be able to do that. Um,
Yeah.
so
Let,
we could
let's let, let let me pause right there, and
absolutely.
because there's so much to unpack from your story. You've had, like, you lived basically like what, 4 different lives within your childhood? And,
Yes.
you know, I went through multiple homes too, and that's how I feel as well. It's like, man, I lived that life and then that life and then that life and that life. Like I was kind of like a different person each time. And it does like in the long term, right? It really impacts you and how you show up in your adult life.
Yes.
There's really great things that come from it, and there's really hard things, right, that we
Yes.
work through every day that come from it. But I want to back up a little bit because, you know, our really wonderful audience here, you know, I know that there are some that know, but there are probably many that don't.
Hmm.
And audience members, as you're listening in, we'd love to hear from you. So if you have questions, please share them in the comments and I can see them on LinkedIn. So feel free to just share any questions for Tony or myself as we're talking. And we're going to respond to your questions in a little bit. And you can show us some love on using the emojis there on LinkedIn and, you know, like and applause and love anything that Tony's saying, because there's a lot of great things being talked about tonight. But backing up a little bit, let's talk a little bit about what your perspective of um, your experience and maybe how that shaped you having experienced the group home setting, aka right congregate care in the
Yes.
foster care system, like not a lot of
Yes.
people know. I didn't really know either for the longest time that there are multiple avenues within the foster care system in child welfare, right? You go
Yes.
to kinship care, you go to temporary homes, you go to permanent homes, where
Yes.
some are adopted and some are never adopted, but it's their
Yes.
permanent home. And then there's congregate care. And there's multiple types of congregate care. So different types of group homes, like you were talking about.
Yes.
And these in particular, you know, I think it's really hard, at least people that I know that have experienced congregate care, it was a hard experience because there was, you're not connected to family, like a nuclear
Yes.
family that's there as parent figures, that's there as like sibling relationships. You know, you don't really form those kinds of close, well, if you are able to form close relationships, but you don't even get that opportunity because
Yes.
it's like a system, it's like an institution that you're a part of instead of a home and a family.
Yes.
So really curious, like to hear just kind of like what your experience and perspective coming out of that situation is.
Absolutely. So I can tell you from my perspective what was the system like. There was counselors on a rotating basis from 3 to 7, 7 to 3, 3 to 11. So they worked in shifts. Um, and throughout my various different group homes when I was placed in that organization, um, I've I have built some great relationships. I was very fortunate that there were times that the staff in the group homes they saw the potential in me when I didn't see it in myself. There were many holidays and breaks where some of the other young men in the group home would go home because they had like visitation to go back home on the weekends. Um, I would say I didn't want that. I didn't want to go back home on my visitation, so I chose to stay at the group home. Um,
Hmm.
I was very fortunate that I was very personable, so I made a lot of friends through high school, where I was able to like go and visit their families during the breaks when I was in care. Um, when I left for college, for many foster youth, I would say having housing during the college breaks was is one of the toughest things. Even today, they still struggle, right? Because they don't have places to go. So I was fortunate that my college basketball coach let me stay at his house during many of the breaks. I was actually
Mhm.
befriended by two twin boys whose dad worked at the college. And we were able to establish a relationship where, for like almost a 10-year span, I would go to their house for Christmas and Thanksgiving. So I started to sort of build my nuclear family, even though it wasn't biological of my own. Um, but I also knew at a young age that I had to navigate two systems, right? The
Mhm.
education and the foster care system. Um, there's a Maya Angelou quote that talks about, there's a story that's inside of us, right? And it needs to be like told. Um,
Yeah.
that has always, stuck with me once I heard that quote. And there was times, like you mentioned, that I didn't want to share my story. I didn't want to, let people know that I didn't come from, a nucleus family. Um, I was very shy about it, right? There's a lot of statistics. And as soon as you say, your kid in a group home, they think, oh, there's always like a negative connotation that goes along
Oh,
with
yeah.
it. And being a diverse male at that,
Mhm.
right? There's another layer, right? And I'm talking now as an adult, but these are some of the things that I didn't know back then, right? That there's all these stigmas and it's negative about it, but I'm somehow, I got old enough to my creator that I was blessed with people that just kept coming. And I say it also attributes to my attitude, right? Even though I was going through this, I always had um, the gratitude attitude, right? I was thankful for every little thing, especially when people did things for me. I was so grateful that I would I would want to reciprocate that even though I didn't have much. I always wanted, to reciprocate that. And I think if you fast forward to the work that I've done all my years, I've been consistent. Even my work today as a school counselor, um, I the students that I'm around, I pour into them because I'm pouring in what I didn't have when I was their age. So I'm going every day with the intent of just pouring into them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that piece of your story of, how you really are able to take the lived experience that you have, and for yourself, and I'm sure for your family and for all the youth that you're around every single day, like, you're utilizing it to make this world better for people now and in the
Yes.
future. Like, that's all right? That is the power that we have with our lived experiences. I really love that part of your story, and I'm so happy, right, that there's people like you that are committed to doing work like that, because it
Yes.
is hard.
Yes.
It is so hard, especially as a person with lived experience. It's hard to visit that trauma every single day
Mhm.
from your past, from your memory banks, from your whole somatic being, like, inside you
Mhm.
feel it anytime, right, that there's a trigger that comes up from
Yes.
your past experience. And yeah, you can't talk about it all the time. And
Mhm.
there's not always people around that are going to get it. And so
Yes.
it's really hard as someone with lived experience to continue in that work for years and years and years and years.
Yes.
So it's amazing that you do that. But I do hope that you take care of yourself, and like you
Oh, yes.
are making sure you're prioritizing your well-being too.
Yes.
Because I feel like as foster care alum, which we both are, and I'm a transracial adoptee, and that's another layer of complication too. It, we have the challenge of working through, right, the mindset that we owe the world everything.
Yes.
So then we have to give everything, and that's not true. That's not true.
Mhm.
We did not ask to be put in the situations we were put into, but we are navigating them the best that we can now as grown people and even as young people, right? We were doing
Yes.
the best we could, and we don't owe anybody anything for that. because we were not given what we needed
Yes.
to begin with.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
really hard to work through that whole, we call it the dominant narrative of you owe your
Yep.
foster home, or you owe your foster parents, or you owe the group home, or you owe your adoptive parents
Mhm.
everything. And
Yeah, the staff
no,
members, like,
yep,
there's a long
yep.
time where I felt that guilt, especially as I gotten older, like, people who have helped me along the way, I felt like I had to give back, or I had to go the extra mile, which I do, but it was a part of me that felt, like, obligated because they had helped me during certain times that I felt, like, obligated to do it, but it was more of a me thing, and understanding that it's a mindset shift, right?
Yes.
There are good people out there, and I can tell you, I had amazing people in my life that just, you talking about mothers, I had so many mother figures along my journey that I feel blessed to have had, like, in every various stages, that are still in my life today. That I would shoot a text, I get on the phone, I FaceTime with them, and we would chat about, hey, do you remember this? Or I'll pull up an old picture and take a picture of it and send it to them. Hey, you remember this picture? And the memories that it brings back. Um, it's just, I'm grateful. I'm grateful, so grateful for the people, especially the mother figures that have played the role in my life.
Yeah, I mean, we need each other. We None of us can do this alone. And, a lot of folks that end up feeling super alone and don't get like the kind of support that you were able to get, or the kind of support that I was able to get throughout my journey, right? There's really alarming statistics about people who have experienced foster care and people who have experienced adoption not being okay. And
Yes,
they end up, right, with trying to self-harm, even losing their lives
yes,
because they feel so alone and isolated. So it's really important, right, that we be in community together, working together, supporting each other, lifting each other up. And yeah, we need those amazing uh, care workers and social
yes,
workers as a part of our journey, but it again, right? It doesn't mean that we owe them everything. So
yes,
it's like that balance is really, really challenging, but it sounds like, you were able to find that balance and shift your mindset, as you say,
yes,
to make sure that you're prioritizing your health and your wellness in addition, right, to making this world a better place and giving back to this
yes,
community. Um, so I would love to hear, Tony, just like because of all that you shared, I think it's really important for us to like really focus in and prioritize, right,
mhm,
lived experience voices.
yes,
So my voice matters and your voice matters. And often we're like overshadowed by society's dominant narratives, just like we were talking about, right?
mhm.
Like that we owe the world and we need to be grateful and blah, blah, blah. But I would like to know, like, you as a foster care alum, like, what is most important for you for the world to know and hear? Like, how we should be supported, or how we should be heard, how our stories are reflected. Like, what do you think is most critical?
I think there's multi levels of this. I'm going to speak in terms of what I'm looking my organization Foster Minds to do to sort of the focus area, and I think for me is the high school graduation, right? Um, we want to make sure that our foster youth are graduating high school because we know the statistics. If you don't have a high school diploma, how tough the life is. But if you have the trauma coming out of the foster care system and not being able to even obtain a high school diploma, you're already behind the eight ball, that this is going to put you even further. Um, and I know that people say education is for some people, but I want to say, like, if it wasn't for my education, I don't think I would be able to do the stuff that I was able to do without education. It opened so many doors. Um, and I'm not saying that, education is a necessity to be successful. I'm just saying from my experience as a former sports youth alum, getting an education is going to be able to get you in different arenas where you be able to showcase and tell your story and be able to help other people. So I
Mm-hmm.
think if we can get more students to graduate, I'm speaking from New York. If we can get more people to graduate from high school, force youth to graduate from high school, that's going to then get them on to, if they want to go to college. We have to increase that number because that staggering 3% nationally of forced youth obtaining a 4-year degree, that number hasn't changed since I was in care, and that was a long time ago. Um, and there's programs that are, there's funding for students to go to college, but if we can't get them to graduate, that money is just sitting there.
Yep. Yeah, I
Um,
think it's pretty like staggering what some of the statistics are, and it disproportionately impacts people of color and youth of color
yes,
because people of color and youth of color are disproportionately represented in these institutionalized systems.
yes,
And when I was looking up, just different things about congregate care, there are like on a given year, there's about 400,000 foster youth in the United States.
yes,
55,000 of them are in congregate care, and most of them are people of color. And then you can see, right, how that translates in our country, how more people of color are incarcerated and they continue being put into these like institutionalized
yes,
systems that impact them long term, which then, to your point, impacts their ability to graduate high school,
yes,
earn a degree, earn these advanced skills that we know builds wealth and
yes,
opportunity. And, you know, with the inclusion initiative, like your organization, right? Like you are trying to essentially close an opportunity gap for youth that are
yes,
experiencing these systems. And I am trying to close the opportunity gap along with our community, the opportunity gap that the people with our lived experience face in the workplace because of
yes,
these uh, this loss of opportunity, the ability to even gain or grab these opportunities, because right, a lot of us have trouble finishing high school. Many of us do not ever go to college.
yes,
And, I know like with your college journey, that was quite a journey, right? For
yes,
me, it took me 9 years to get my 4-year degree. 9 years. That is a long time. That's a big gap of
yeah,
opportunity that I missed out on because I
yep,
wasn't able to graduate like all of my other peers. And I spent an extra 5 years racking up debt, trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, and then missing out on levels and levels of opportunity because of that. And I'm one of the really fortunate ones. I got to finish my 4-year degree from a really great school. And then I went on and I got an MBA, like
yes,
from a top B school. Like there are countless people with our lived experience that never ever even come close to being able to do
yes,
that. And
yes,
so that is unacceptable. And I think it's just a real testament to how under-resourced youth that experience these institutions are when they leave, when they age out.
yeah,
And I know that your experience is different, but you also have like pockets of those lived experiences of the struggles in education. So, if you wouldn't mind talking about that a little bit, in terms of why you're focused on that with your Fostering Minds organization, and like, I guess just some of the challenges you really see youth coming out of these systems are facing when it comes to navigating the educational system.
Absolutely. I would just start with, when they move from group homes to group homes, right? That sometimes you're moving from school district to school district, right? So you can be at one school and let's say you can have earned 9 credits in the academic year. You move to a different school district, now you may lose credits because the school may not be, they may not accept all of your credits, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do that 4 to 5 times, right? And you're aging at the same time, right? So you're never going to catch up. And I'm speaking for here in New York State because we are a state that um, you have to graduate with a Regents exams out of 5 of the core areas. And so you have to take assessments at the end of the year, but you also have to maintain a certain amount of credits to graduate, right? So you have to be both to graduate from high school. So if you're a foster youth, navigating, going from district to district, right? By the time you get to that, that 18, 19-year old, right, and you don't have enough credits, now you're on the verge of, all right, do I drop out and get a GED, right? And
Yep.
I'm going to be honest, I was there. I remember having a conversation with my, the unit administrator outside of one of the group homes, and I was like, I don't think I can do this, right? I am going back for my second year, my senior year. I have like 4 exams I have to take. If I don't pass these exams, I'll be going back for another year. Um, and I remember saying to her, I don't think I can do it. And she looked me in the eye. She's like, you're going to do it. You have what it takes. And that's the end of the conversation. She got in the car and she drove off. Um, but you know what? She was right.
Yep.
I remember it was June of 1997. I had to take all those exams. And guess what? I passed every single one of those exams by the skin of my teeth. And my biggest struggle was writing, right? I was had trouble going from here to here, and that was my biggest struggle. Um, Not because I wasn't smart, but I had lost all that foundation of the critical writing years, right? In elementary and middle school, that because I was running the streets, because I was cutting school, I didn't have, that foundation. So I had to learn really quickly. And I even went into college with a huge deficit. Going into my senior year of high
Mm.
school, I was reading and writing at the eighth grade level. In my
Wow.
senior year, like
Wow.
that's but you know what? I was determined. I set a goal for myself, and I still have this letter of recommendation from my English teacher that wrote. I actually applied to the Culinary Institute, and he wrote this recommendation, and I have it. And he said, he never witnessed someone who was so determined to improve his writing in such a short amount of time. It was incredible. And he's been teaching at that point. I think it had been like 17 years. He was a English teacher, and he's seen all different types of students. Um, but he wrote that in the recommendation, and I read that, and that always been when we go back to the mindset. I always had that sort of fear when it came to my writing. So there was I'm a school counselor now, and I had to go back to school for a second master's. And
Mm-hmm.
the transcript sat in my desk for like almost a year and a half before I applied because I was
Wow.
like, I don't know if I can, write the essay. I don't think my writing skills are that strong, but I did it, right? I put myself out there. And now, fast forward, now I'm in a doctorate program. It's very intense and it's a different type of writing. But even applying for this program, I was like, already in that defeated mindset.
Mm.
But now it's totally off the table now, right? I'm writing, I'm doing what I need to do, but it's some of those things that just sticks with you for such a long time. Um, that it becomes ingrained and you have to sort of break that. I would say for me, what the group has taught me is how to follow the rules. I was such a rule follower in terms of making my bed and doing my chores and getting my little bit of allowance that it, it, it sort of hindered me in some of my relationships because I would be
Yep.
passive. I would be really, really passive in certain situations where I wouldn't speak up for myself. I would say,
Yep.
"Oh, all right, I just follow the rules. Somebody told me to do something. I just follow the rules," and that affected a relationship of mine. It really affected some of my relationships. But I've since grown since then, um, and I still find myself from time to time those thought patterns do sneak in a little bit. But I have a set of tools I'll be able to combat. When I do get in those modes.
Yeah. And talk to me a little bit about like how you utilize that when supporting youth with your same lived experience, especially navigating things like education and like the
Yes,
workplace.
yes. So my motto is I meet students where they are. Right. Um, a lot of people have said Steve Covey said it and St. Francis. So it says, seek for understanding before being understood. Right.
Mhm.
And that has always, once I heard that, that has always been my philosophy. I always like to meet people where they are in their journey, when they come to me face to face, because then I'll be able to walk alongside them and have an understanding of where they've been. And that has helped me build so many solid relationships and sustainable relationships that is not
Mhm.
surface level, right? I want to know about your journey, right? Because then we can find the similarities and see where you have stepped over and the obstacles you had to cross, and we can share those, right? And be able to walk side by side on reaching your goal, and then I'll be able to say, all right, how can I help you? I may not be the person to help you, but I can, you probably understand about social capital, right? And
Mhm.
when I meet a person, and when we establish that relationship, right, it's all about social capital, right? I may not be the person, but I have someone in my social capital that I'll be able to make connections. Um, and that's what I love doing. I love helping people find those connections and helping them shine and getting them to the next level.
Yeah. I love that. It takes a lot of work
It does.
to like shift our behaviors and our
Yes.
mindset and to really empower ourselves. Like you said, like you were passive for such a long time because that's what you were taught is how
Yes.
you should behave.
Hmm.
And I know for me, I know for a lot of people with this lived experience, both as an adoptee and as a foster care alumni, like those shifts in mindset are super challenging for us to even recognize, especially in
Hmm.
the workplace or in school or, in those structured settings, right? Because
Yes.
it's such a habit for us
Hmm.
and outcomes, right? That we feel like we have to be the best and be perfect and like you didn't even want to apply for your educational programs because you felt like you weren't going to be able to write perfect
Yes.
enough, right? And
Yep.
so it really limits again our ability to grab opportunities, and these are real barriers
Yes.
that fortunately like you and I have been able to overcome over time.
Hmm.
But I always think back on how many years I really missed out on grabbing these opportunities because I had to
Yeah.
work to get past these barriers and challenges, and I
Hmm.
had to do it on my own
Yes.
because there aren't people in school that we can connect with right away, and especially in the workplace, that's even harder to find people that actually understand our lived experience and can help us navigate through those situations
Yes.
in a healthy and impactful way. And so pivoting a little bit, I wanted to talk to you about that
Sure.
and your experience when you put on your lens of being a foster care alum, and like how those past learned um behaviors and like maybe how you have felt like isolated in certain situations, like when you're at work or when you're in like your master's or doctorate program, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how that can often like show up unexpectedly. And I know for me, like it's like sometimes it's like snuck up and I'm like, oh. And other times it's like slap me, like, oh my goodness. That is a
Yeah.
real trigger for me. And I didn't realize it, but it comes from like my experience being in foster care or my experience being a transracial adoptee, right? Where I was usually the only person of color in my environment. And I'm like
Mm-hmm.
trying to assimilate and behave in a way that's actually not me, but I've never been allowed to be anything else
Yes.
because I've been told I don't belong unless you act like this and you dress
Yes.
like this and you
Yes.
speak like this and you write like this. And it took me a long time to overcome that and really figure out who the heck is Grace Young Foster. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm so proud of myself for knowing this now. But in my 30s, gosh, like like people should not have to wait
Yes.
this long,
Yes.
especially from our, people from our community who many of
Yes.
them don't even have family to lean on anyways to help
Yes.
navigate all this. So I say all that because, the Inclusion Initiative was born much like your organization was born because our communities are really under resourced in society. And especially when we talk about the workplace, I felt such exclusion. I felt like I could never bring up these identities and have them really be like understood or even like valued, right? Most of the time when I talk about, oh, I'm adopted and I was in foster care, some people are like, oh, great, cool. Other people are like, oh, okay, let's not talk about
Mm.
that.
Yes.
There are very few people that are like, oh, tell me more. And
Yes.
how did that impact you? And usually those people were really the very few people that I came across that had similar life experiences. And not having that sense of belonging anywhere I worked and
Mm-hmm.
always feeling so different yet can't talk about it, right? And I could never really truly fit in with Asian Americans because
Yep.
I was transracially adopted, which meant like I acted and behaved like a white person and I didn't have any Asian culture or heritage or ancestors or anything to draw upon
Mm-hmm.
to really understand what Asian culture was in America. So like I couldn't fit in there, and
Yes.
then clearly didn't
Yeah.
fit in with white people because look at me, right? And so it was such a weird in between place to be my whole career. And I'm just curious how it might have impacted you, if at all. Um, so just share a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Um, you hit on the topic about your identity in terms of your race and your culture. It was the same for me, right? I'm 100% Puerto Rican. Mom and dad are both Puerto Rican, and growing up in the system, I didn't know that identity, right? Except for, when I was at high school, my last high school, it was 90+% of Dominican students at the high school.
Mm,
So I was exposed to sort of the Spanish culture, but not necessarily the Puerto Rican culture. So it
yeah.
was a lot of it that I had to learn. I didn't speak the language, right? And like you said, the way I spoke, I had people tell me, "Oh, you sound white," and I'm like, "What does that sound like? What does that sound like?" Right?
Yeah.
Or when you get up on stage, you give a presentation, you get off stage, and be like, "Wow, you said that so eloquently." And I'm like, How was I supposed to sound? Right? Like
Yeah.
little microaggressions like that. Those became hard, right? And like I said, I was passive, right? So you feel it, right, when people say or they make more remarks, or something at the workplace like a holiday party, or people talk about their families and doing this and that, and then you're thinking, well, I don't have any of that, right? But you just stay quiet, you smile, right? You just go along with the conversation, right? but no one really asks, right? In certain situations, oh, what are you doing for the holidays, right?
Mhm.
They don't. It wasn't reciprocated. Um, so that I had a tons of experience like that where I just felt like, all right, that like other people had that experience. Like I'm okay, when
Yeah.
deep down inside that was something I craved, right? Um, I don't know about you, but when I was in my 20s and in my 30s, when I craved a mom figure, right, and the dad figure, right, like a real, like I had my moms, but it wasn't
Yeah.
like when you see
It's not the
somebody,
same.
it's not the same.
And
It's
you're a
not the
parent,
same.
like, you know it's not the same.
It's
I'm
not
a
the
parent
same.
now too. Yeah.
And it's really hard. Like for years, I didn't up until I met my wife. I didn't like Christmas. I didn't like Thanksgiving. Right? I was happy for
Yeah.
people, but I didn't get into the spirit. And then once I had children, I did it more. I did it more for them. Right? And it just grew.
Yeah.
It grew on me. But it was years where I couldn't
It's
stand it.
very
Like
very
it was hard.
triggering.
It was hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
And very emotional. And I find myself at certain times, and my wife is good about it now because she'll pick it up and she'll ask me certain questions like, "Are you okay?" Like, but it was for years that I wouldn't say anything. Even like even tomorrow, I wouldn't say anything because I'm like, "Oh, I can deal with it. I'll be fine."
Yeah.
I had the tools to,
Yeah.
but that was all I was doing is just hiding. I wasn't being true to myself. Um, but that's some of the things I'm still working with, even today, as part of my practice. Because it's in me, it's ingrained in me. But I am recognizing when I get into those moments and where I need to sort of like take a step back and say, hey, you don't have to. Um, your life is okay, right? You're not that foster, you're not that foster
Right.
child anymore. Um, but
Right.
there's moments where that it comes out like subconscious. It just comes out. Um,
Mhm. And it's
but it's
it's
hard.
why it's why we need continuous support systems. Even though we are fully grown and we have 15 plus years in our careers, we
Hmm.
still need these support systems.
Yes.
And I was feeling it so strongly, but couldn't find it,
Hmm.
especially in my workplaces where we spend most of our time.
Yes.
Where I'm like, this is not okay. That this kind
Hmm.
of support system and structure is not existing for people with our lived experience.
Hmm.
And so, to your point, right? Like, we have learned tools to navigate, but it doesn't mean that we still don't need to talk about it sometimes
Yes.
and find community
Yes.
sometimes in the ways that we want to find it. And it needs to be available.
Yes.
So I'm really
Yes.
glad to see organizations and institutions like the education system, like, starting to build like these small building blocks.
Yes.
But there's so much more work to do
Yep.
in resourcing, right, our communities, especially as adults.
Yep.
And, I see all these resources, which is great, by the way. I see all these resources for parents, for
Yes.
people that take in children,
Hmm.
for that kind of scenario and ongoing. But I see very few for us that
Yes.
live that every day. And we're the
Yes.
ones that were literally collateral damage, you know?
Yeah.
So, no, I appreciate you sharing that, especially about holidays are really hard.
Yes.
They're very hard, and they can be so wonderful because for some folks in our with our lived experience, right, that was like the one happy moment out of the year that they got.
Yep.
That's kind of how it was for me, but
Hmm.
others, it's so triggering because they literally were all by themselves and had nobody. And you just it's hard to explain that to anybody else except for someone
Hmm.
that's lived it with you
Yes.
or lived it like you. So I
Yes.
really appreciate you sharing that with me
Absolutely.
and know that I understand. um, But I wanted to also ask, while we're on the topic of, work and school and like, just these spaces, right, where there aren't enough resources and there isn't enough belonging for us yet.
Hmm.
What do you want the future of work or the future of like educational experiences to look like for people with our lived experience? I know you're working towards this. So what do you
Hmm.
see when you look at the future?
You know, here, I'm gonna start here, right in here in New York, right? My goal, right, like you said, I'm pursuing a doctorate program, and my goal is I want to be at the table with some of the policymakers, being able to make the change with some of the policies for the foster youth. I would love to, I talked earlier about how when they move from group homes to group homes and they're losing credit, I would love to come up with um, some type of metric so that they're not losing credits. So, you know, just some of the things that I've
Yeah.
thought about in the past, years. Like, let's say one kid moved from five different schools, in a span of 2 academic years and earned X amount of credits. Instead of having that student um, go back to the school and try to remediate some of those credits, let's give them an assessment to see where they are in terms of the academic, so that way we can get them right, like get them to take an exam, prep them for the exam and see what they learn, and then have them earn credit. Those are some of the things that like I think about,
Yeah.
working with the state ed department here in New York to sort of help the foster youth. Because if you, and it's around the country, when you talk to foster youth that have been at multiple different schools, right, that earn credit, right, it's usually they're behind or they're ahead, but they're usually not on track to graduate, or don't know,
Mm,
not likely to graduate on time with their class.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
those are some of the things that I want to do, and sort of in getting my doctorate. It's in K-12 education, citizen
Yeah.
leadership. So that's one aspect. Working here, I work directly with a foster care agency here in the Capital District where I live in New York, where I'm actually doing some work with their staff of the group homes, where I am um, pretty much going in there and telling my story, and
Mm-hmm.
letting them know that their work is really valuable. Because as you know, right, the turnover rate and people who are working in child welfare, it's 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 high. Turnover, they
Yeah.
don't stay because the work is hard working with youth with trauma, right? But if you can get the right staff through the hiring practice that is committed to the work and understand what they're getting into,
Yeah.
that's huge for the youth that they're going to be interacting with.
Mm-hmm.
And if they believe that what they're doing, even if it's the most minute thing, as just listening to a youth, right, and just pouring in the hope and separating the behavior from the youth, right? Because sometimes it's hard if the student is, acting out because of the trauma that they had to endure, right? It's kind of hard to separate
Yeah.
that from the foster youth. Um, but that's my school counselor lens that is always at play. Is like I separate the behavior from the person, because understanding that you know that student is having that behavior because something has disrupted their lives, right? And if you understand that, you'll be able to then guide them with grace and love, and do it in a therapeutic way. um, I think getting the staff to understand that is good. Some of the things I have on sort of my radar is working with the same agency, working with their middle schoolers and their
Mm-hmm.
middle school is an elementary age, and really just having some concrete conversations and some tools to help them build a tool case at that young age. And some of the mindfulness stuff is also going to come into play, right? Because if you can teach them mindfulness at a young age, that's a toolkit that they can carry for the rest of their lives, and
Yeah.
understand that their circumstance is not going to dictate their future. I did create a framework. It's built off of research and also my personal experience. And it's all for three P's, right? The first one is, you prime your story, prepare your plan, and you pivot your approach, right? You priming your story. I want to help them change the narrative that just because you were in foster care doesn't mean that your life is over, right? I want to give you the
Mhm.
tools to sort of to start to prime your story and try to change your narrative, right? Um, Pivot your approach, right? Once you change your narrative and you know where you're going, right, you start to become an explorer. You want to start to try new things, right? And then once you prepare your plan, it's okay. Now you're on a journey. Now you know what direction you want to go. And that's the final piece. And when you combine all of those three pieces together, right in the middle lies the steadfast success. And why I said steadfast success because it's going to take some time, specifically for foster youth. You mentioned it took you 9 years to get a bachelor's degree, right? Think about those students that don't have a high school diploma, but they want to achieve so much more, right? It's going to take them some time to get there. What I like about my framework is that it's fluid, right? There's some students that already embrace their story. They can jump right in to prepare their plan or pivot where they are, right? Um, I have spoken with some foster youth who have transitioned out and they're like currently in college, so they're working for um, foster care agencies themselves because they want to give back and they're looking to pivot where they are and want to do other things, right? So that's where my framework can come in and help them sort of navigate where they are and where they want to go, right? Um, so that's what I'm sort of bringing to the table, right? And it's I'm bringing my personal experience, but I'm also bringing all of me, right? I feel like the work that I'm doing with Foster Reminds is a capstone project of my life where I'm able to just help youth. I can do it within a group setting, but I can also work individually. Um, it's going on 3 years since I established Foster Minds, and along the way, I've been building steps, building connections because I want to be the conduit here in Albany where the foster care agencies can come through, work through Foster Minds model to be able to get many of their youth to find success, depending on
Mhm.
where they are within their organization. But right now, I'm currently starting with one locally to sort of start to build the sort of the different pilot programs and to work along kind of hand in hand. And once we get some solid stuff off the ground, then we'll be able to emulate that with some of the other foster care agencies here in the capital region.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's incredible work, Tony. You should be really, really proud.
It's hard work. I'm on the phone every week with the grandmother of the organization, and my motto since day one has been you have to trust the process. And she's been using it every single conversation, even when we get some setbacks. I'm like, no, just trust the process. Like this is all part of it because when this gets off the ground and everything starts clicking, we don't have to look back and cross the T's and dot the I's because we already have planned for what is to come.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sharing your website there with the audience. So please check out fosteringminds.co. And I just want to show you here, Krista is just telling you that
Oh,
she's
thank
so
you.
proud of you. Yeah, I echo that. I'm really proud of you too, Tony. Like we like are literally meeting like virtually tonight, and I feel
Yeah,
like I've known you for 20
I
years
know, I
already,
know.
but I'm so proud of you because you can see your journey and you can see just your heart and your passion for a better future for youth in these situations. And ultimately, what I'm hearing is what you want, right, for the future is for youth that are in foster care and have that lived experience that they can own their voice, they own their power, and they own like what their future looks like. And it's not
Yes,
dictated, right, by the stigmas and biases that we've been talking
yes,
about, but they are crafting what their
yes,
own story and future is. And you're
yes.
on the you are like your framework is great. I love that. It's
Thank
definitely
you.
going to make a big difference in those youth lives. And I just wanted to also ask too, like thinking back on the past organizations or companies that you've worked for, and you may not have ever thought about this before, but it's okay if you haven't. But like, when you think about your identity as a foster care alum and like how that you weren't able to show that or how you did choose to show that in the workplace and like how that impacted you. I'm just curious, like wha- like what would you want to see be different for, the Tony back then?
Yeah, I've held a lot of different jobs, and just looking back at this point, I would say there was times where I didn't show up, like in terms of my authentic self, right? Again, I'm always a rule follower, so I follow the rules.
Yep.
A mentor said to me a long time ago. He said, "You can play the game, right? But you can't use your rules at the same time.
Yeah.
And once you figure out what's at play, if someone using their own rules, you play your game." And that was such solid advice for me because I was able to navigate the system, and I navigated in such a way where I was sort of under the radar, but I also knew to be intentional in how I sort of handle different situations and different jobs. Um, and then fast forward now, I would say within my last, 2 to 3 jobs that I've held, I've gotten more and more being Tony Rivera, and being my authentic self and being able to showcase who I am, as a foster youth alum. And people who meet me, I, I, I'll be the first to say it. Yes, I'm a proud foster youth alum. I give credit for
Yep.
the. I talked about that HLP, Higher Education Opportunity Program, I was a part of. There's, I start with that, and I start with how I, survived the foster care system, and that how I'm looking to change that for others. And people are like, it's amazing when you put that out into the universe, and then I have people that's like, uh, it sounds really hard what you're thinking about doing, but I because you sound so convincing and so passionate about wanting to do that, I want to know how I can sort of help.
Yep.
That is it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, you're inspiring others because you're being true to yourself
Yes,
and you're showing up the way you want to show up, and that's infectious for sure. Yeah, I mean, I can see it all over you when we talk. And Tony, like, is there something that you think workplaces can provide or institutions can provide to adoptees or foster alum that would make our experience better?
the first thing that comes to mind, I know that most employers have a EAP program, right?
Hmm.
And there's a counselor piece in there. Um, I would say, if they can, some type of wording. This is all what's coming to mind right now. Some type of wording that's like inclusive of, if you have foster youth experience or growing up within the system, and it can be any system, right? Um, that sort of may have impacted your growth in some way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
Knowing that there's a place to talk about that, right, and to bring that in. Um, I mean, it's kind of hard. I would say bringing into the hiring and questioning, but that may you may want to know. You may want to know that about somebody, right? They may not have the academic background that you're looking for,
Right.
but if you can substitute 3 years of their experience and be like, wow, that person has the persistence, the determination, the
And
the
skills that
grit.
they've learned,
Yes,
yes, through
that
having
can
to
help you.
navigate
Yep.
relationships and systems. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
No, I
That would be
totally
truly
agree.
helpful. That would be truly helpful.
I totally agree. Right. And it's all about like looking at non-traditional resumes and really asking why instead of asking why not, like, why
Yes.
don't they have this? And it's like, oh, why does their resume look like this? I'm interested. Like, what do they
Yeah.
bring to the table because of all of this? And I
Yeah.
will tell you, I'm sure you've experienced this too, but I had to like qualify a lot of the gaps in my resume, especially earlier in my career, and had to
Yes.
explain, right? Which is so triggering.
Yes.
It makes you feel like then too, right? Like, am I actually good enough to be here? So anyway, I know that you completely understand my
Yes.
experiences, and I really appreciate that. And I've really appreciated our time together. And where we have I got one question from an audience member,
Sure.
just asking about your doctorate
Yes.
and what you're going to focus on in your doctorate to bring into your work now.
Great question. So right now it's I'm in the early stages of the program, but it is focused on K-12 systems. Um, and the reason why I chose a specific program is because of the systems, right? And it teaches you, even though it's K-12, but the readings and the knowledge that you're gaining is to navigate pretty much any system and how to be a change leader within any system. So I'm looking to take that skill set and focus on the foster care system and the state ed system and how we can
Mm,
get those two um, to communicate and see where there's the overlap.
yeah,
I
work
think
together better. Yeah.
yes, yep. In the sort of perspective of the foster youth at the forefront. Yep,
Hmm. Yep.
yep,
We are, one of our phrases here at the Inclusion Initiative is center our voices, center us, right?
yes,
Like,
yes.
it is not
I
done
love that.
enough. And yeah, we have a lot of work to do till we get to that place where we're truly centered in these decisions, in these policies, in these frameworks, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for being a part of that and doing what you're
Yes,
doing to like make that a reality. And I'm
yes,
so excited to like be in this space with you and work alongside you as we elevate our communities and make our
yes.
futures and presents better. So I really appreciate your time, Tony. And to close this out, why don't you just share with us one way that you want the community to support those with lived experience in the foster care system?
I would say if you don't know much about the foster care system, um, the Casey Foundation is a great place to start. They are like the gold mine for anything foster youth. I mean, there's other data, but foster youth related data, um, it's a great resource. They up to date. They write different reports every year that gives the outcomes from around the
Yeah.
country. But that's a great place to start. And if you wherever you are locally in the country, I would say if you can volunteer within the foster care agency, um, if you can be a foster parent, be a foster parent if you have the capability of doing that, or if you just want to mentor or foster youth or the kids in the group home, right? Do something to volunteer your time because I think any time that you can give someone in the foster care system, it's going to help shape their lives.
Yeah, that's going to have a pretty significant impact
Hmm.
because they are truly looking for that connection with people
Yes,
that care about them. Yeah, I agree. If you can provide that even in a small way, that it makes a difference in someone's life for sure. So yes,
yeah,
I thank you so much, Tony, for your time and for sharing just your lived experience with us. It means a lot. And we are BFFs now. So
I love
So
it
I
too.
can't wait to do
And
more
we
of
have a
these
lot
with
of
you in
we
the
have a couple of
future.
mutual friends, which I didn't know up until this past week. We have mutual friends,
Oh,
so that was
good.
good to see.
Yeah.
That was good to see on LinkedIn.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it tends to be a small world. So I'm really happy to have you be officially a part of mine. So thank you again, Tony. And
Thank you
for
so much for
every
having me and giving me the platform to share, fostering minds and my story. Um, I'm really
absolutely.
thank you.
No,
Yeah,
I
thank
mean,
you.
your story is incredible. The work you're doing is incredible. It needs to be shared. So it's my privilege and honor to have you here tonight with us. And I just want to share too how people can get in touch with you. So there is the handsome Tony there, and fosteringminds.co is his website, and you can find him on Instagram at Fostering Minds LLC. And I'm Grace Young Foster, founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative, and you can find us at those handles as well. And thanks, everybody. That concludes this Let's Talk LinkedIn Live event series, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye.